A lot of the millennials are choosing to rent. People want flexibility, so great for us, right? The people that have the real estate that have places for these guys to rent. So I don't want to, as we're kind of going over this, any real estate is good, but we're specifically talking about why 2 to 4 units is extra good in some ways. So first things first, let's cover the favorable financing options. So favorable financing options means you can cover multiple income streams up to 4 on one conventional loan. And you can get up to 10 loans individually or 20 loans as a married couple if you guys take turns. So essentially a married couple could acquire 80 units under conventional financing terms. And conventional financing terms, for those that don't know, that is a 30-year fixed product. And I don't know where Cody is, but rates are probably hovering in the mid-5s right now. So if you think about the long term, I know that we just went through a couple of years of like 3s and 4s, so 5s probably don't sound too good. But when I got started, they were 7 on multifamily. And I know there's probably some in here that have seen a lot higher than 7, right? I mean, there's in the 80s, it was like 18% or whatever. So the long-term fixed debt, basically what that means is that you can lock in a mortgage payment for 30 years fixed and cover multiple units under that one loan. And what do we think that rents will do over 30 years? Do you think they'll stay the same, or do you think they'll go down, or?
Either option.
Up, right? So clearly. So, I mean, of course, taxes, insurance changed a little bit over the years, but for the most part, you can essentially forecast out what an investment's going to do based on the fact that, with the rents, but your mortgage is going to stay pretty much the same for 30 years. The other benefit, of course, is that tenant is paying the mortgage for you. So imagine any other investment where you sign for the loan, but other people pay for it. I don't know that there's really much, Harmony loans, I'm kind of liking that business right now. But anyway, so really super favorable terms. The other thing to note too for owner occupants, I know a couple people said that they were thinking of like house hacking or doing like an owner occupant situation. Oftentimes then you can get FHA loans, right? FHA loans are 3.5% down. So you can invest in whatever you're investing in for as little as 3.5% down. And if you're doing it right on a traditional house hack, you can potentially live rent-free, and all of the tenants around you or in your building are going to pay for that mortgage for you, and then you live rent-free, you live there for a year, and you hopefully do it again, right? So, so huge benefits there. Cody, what are the rates right now for multifamily, by the way?
Owner-occupied FHA or?
Let's do non-owner.
Non-owner, yeah, mid-5s.
Mid-5s.
5.25 to 5.75, depending on who you are, your credit score, all that sort of thing.
Okay, good. The other thing too in locking in that 30-year fixed debt is you do not have to worry about, like with commercial debt, typically there's a 5, 7, or 10-year balloon payment, right? So you need to have your exit strategy figured out, and then you also have to in some ways plan for recessions that could be happening in those periods, right? So we'll kind of cover in another slide some recession proofing.
Can I add one thing on there too? I just am signing up for two commercial loans right now, and they are 5-year fixed with 5-year prepays that are stepped down as you go along the year. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as a percentage of the loan amount as the early payoff. So that doesn't happen in the 2 through 4 unit as well. So you can be liquid and move in and out of those investments a lot faster than you can with commercial without having to pay a penalty.
Right. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
You said up to 20 loans for a married couple.
Mm-hmm.
But you said if you're alternating?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So traditionally, married couples, right, they get debt together, right? So you buy a house that you're both living in, both names are put on the loan, and then you just buy that way, right? Well, if you have everything completely separate and you have 2 W-2 or income producing people, right, and you put a loan in one person's name, then you can have up to 10 loans. But if you're buying everything together, that debt counts against you together. Right, so a lot of times we see married couples where they have the primary residence in both of their name, and usually the primary residence is nicer than the rentals you're going to be buying, right? So that's the higher mortgage. And in some cases, we've even had couples refinance out the primary mortgage into just one person's name, and then the other spouse buys several of the rentals, right? So that you're not having to use that debt against each other. Did you have a question there too?
Yeah, is that only with Freddie or is that with Fannie as well? Fannie as well?
Both.
I thought Fannie was 4.
No.
Change it to 10?
Yeah.
10.
That was a short window of time right after the collapse that they both said 4's it, but then they expanded to 10, but 5 and above was a different LTV, and you needed more reserves, and now they've kind of adjusted that, and they'll both go to 10, and they don't change the LTV requirement anymore. The reserve requirement has adjusted though, so when you get to the point where you have 8 or 10 finance properties, you need to have some money in reserve. We can use 401k or retirement or brokerage accounts for that too.
If you put them in LLCs, does that change anything?
No, because you're still personally guaranteeing that loan, so it's still going to show up on your credit report. Different if you get a commercial loan. Commercial doesn't count against you, but so we're kind of focusing on 2 through 4 right now. So yeah, even in an LLC, you're still going to be, as long as you personally guaranteed the loan, it's still going to show up on your credit report and be counted against you.
So if you had a couple that were, 2 that were in a portfolio loan, you have a private house, you can still get 91, right?
Correct.
Portfolios don't count, but your house does, assuming it's conventional.
Yeah, so anything commercial doesn't count, paid off doesn't count, and your primary residence does count against you as far as one of those counts, right? But you can always add more primary residences as well, right? So if let's say you have a modest primary residence, 9 other rental units, and your spouse has 10 rental units, you can go and buy a new primary residence, follow normal guidelines, and as long as you're moving into that new one, now you have to move in, right? Like, I see where those gears are grinding, right? It needs to make sense, right? You can't buy way down. You got to buy a house that would make sense that you would move into, but that can be your 21st.
Good stuff. We learned something on that one. The other thing too to keep in mind with conventional loans, so we are in a high cost of living area, right? So again, for some of the people that wanted to house hack, if for whatever reason or your qualifications are lower than what houses are going for in the area, they actually bump up when you're looking at multifamily because the lenders, so Cody, uses rental income added to your income in order to qualify. So like, if we have a person that maybe qualifies for $300,000 but is looking at duplex, $300,000 may get them a single family house, but they may go to $450,000 or maybe even $500,000 if you're looking at a duplex because you can add in the rents next door. So lots of kind of flexibility there with these 2 to 4 unit loans. Yeah.
What does house hacking mean?
House hacking. House hacking. Anyone want to explain that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
let's get the
Sure.
audience.
Yeah.
I like it.
Let's get more people.
Essentially means you're living in one unit and having someone else pay the mortgage, so you're hacking the mortgage down.
So it's like travel hacking, biohacking, like house hacking. Like either you're getting a reduced or sometimes free housing.
Almost like on the Nintendo, there a cheat code, right? So like it's a cheat. It's a way to cheat the housing world, right? Yeah.
But you have to budget
for a certain amount of time, right? Like
1 year.
Yeah,
When you're
when you sign up to do House Hack, you are committing to live there for 12 months. They are getting a little more stringent on that, so I would recommend planning on that. But yeah, that's a requirement. Yeah.
What if you refinance within the 1 year? Does the 1 year period start from the refinance date or?
It does. Yeah. So if you refinance, the new set of loan docs would state that you're going to live there for 12 months. Now we have skirted that by knowing somebody wanted to leave. Like let's say you did a owner-occupied BRRRR, right? You go in there, you buy the place, you fix it all up, and you've created a mountain of equity. You come back and refinance it in 9 months, and you're like, hey, I want to refinance this, but then I want to be free to go buy my next primary residence. We refinance it as non-owner occupied. So you just plan for that, and even though you are living there, we refinance it as non-owner so that we can appropriately have the financing set up so you can jump out and buy a new primary residence right away. And we've done that several times.
So that mid-5s non-owner occupied loan you were talking about earlier, if it was owner occupied, how much lower?
4.25%, 4.5%. Yeah. So I mean, and so you are paying a premium to be able to do that. But if you figure everything's got a cost and a benefit, you're paying about a 1% premium on that. That's usually about a 10% rise in payment, right? So if the payment was going to be $2,000, now it's going to be $2,200. Spending that extra $200 to do it right and be able to free yourself up to go out and buy another piece of property inside of 12 months, probably you can make that back, right? But I mean, if you can't, then maybe you wait it out, right?
Cool. Good question. So the other thing that is a huge benefit to buying multifamily is that you get better pricing. And so better pricing meaning a price per unit. So we see duplexes here around, $500,000, $600,000, right? But how many single-family houses do you see that are $250,000, right? Way up north, way down south are really major fixer-uppers, right? So you get a better price per unit when you're getting more units, and the more units that you get, usually it gets better, right? You can be considerably less than single-family houses. Now, the rents are usually not quite as good as single-family, but when you look at it on that per-unit basis, from what that difference is, it's usually pretty good. So the other thing too is oftentimes with multifamily, you'll have one roof, right? So if you have 4 single-family houses and they all need roofs, that's going to be a significant cost. If you have one fourplex that's a 2-story that needs a roof, that's going to be considerably less. So you get obviously better pricing the more units you have, especially that are on the 2 to 4 unit side. The other thing is that the units are usually smaller on multifamily. So I look at cost to renovate, right? If you have a big single family house some strategies are to buy 1,500 or 2,000 square feet single family houses, get a tenant in there, and then just keep it long term and pay it off. Well, the challenge is anytime your tenant moves out, you're likely to burn through all of the cash flow that you made for an entire year, maybe longer, in order, if you have to repaint the house, if you have to do carpet, flooring, any kind of cabinets, the bigger the units, the more the renovations are going to cost. But if you have like 4 units and they're all 1,000 square feet each, it's going to be considerably less to renovate those units, right? So you get a lot of cost savings on that. Let's see. And then same thing, like if you were to fence the units, obviously you're kind of splitting fences between your own units as opposed to single family. You're going to have usually fences on 3 sides or what have you. The other thing, so quality tenants. So small multifamily is kind of, well, literally in between single family and apartments. So single family tenants are a little bit of a different, quality of tenants, and oftentimes are willing to pay more or want a yard, things like that. But in at least my experience, they don't often stay long, right? Because if they're living in a nicer single family house, they usually at some point will say, why am I paying this person's mortgage? I should consider, getting a house for myself. The other thing too is apartment buyers apartment tenants don't often stay as long either, because you have a lot of people crammed in and there's parking issues, things like that. So the turnover typically is a little bit higher in apartments. But the 2 to 4 unit space is kind of that in between. So especially, if you have very efficient units where you have 2 bed, 1 bath is probably my favorite. That's anywhere from like 800 to 1,000 square feet because they're super easy to renovate. You don't have a lot of people usually that are trying to live in 2 bedrooms, and it can appeal to a wide variety of tenants and people, right? So 2 bedrooms, 1 bath could work for a couple with 1 or 2 children. It could work for a single person that wants to have an office. There's a lot of flexibility there. So usually you're able to get tenants that are willing to stay longer term. We were chatting in the car this morning on the way to an inspection about my ideal tenant has bad credit but can afford their rent. And I specifically like, you probably too, right? I like tenants that have bad credit but have overall like good debt to income, because it's unlikely that they are going to buy a house and leave me. Sounds bad. We are recording this. I like to be transparent. But it's unlikely that they'll leave and buy a house, and then there's certain landlords and there's certain property managers that say like a minimum credit score of 650 or 700. And let's face it, most tenants probably live paycheck to paycheck, right? And bad credit is often caused by medical bills or student loans or certain situations, right? So like my average tenant stays, I think, 4.5 years, which is insane. I think my longest one was like literally I bought the property and they were there and they are still there because they have bad credit. Nobody else wants to rent to them. Yeah.
Do you have a minimum credit score?
So on the tenant screening side, you do have to state your criteria.
Right.
So I do have a very low minimum credit score, and I have some kind of verbiage in there that says, exceptions to be made. Yeah, so you have to be careful, but yes. So anyways, quality tenants to me are, like I said, bad credit, and they will stay a long time, and then they won't call me. So that that is my goal. I do
How
not
many
like
times
the
does that work
calls.
out?
But then sometimes you never get a call, and then they move out, and then you realize that you
You
never got
wished you got
a
a
call.
call.
And so but you know what? In some cases, I'd rather do it all in one as opposed to over time. So, anyways, the other thing is there's multiple exit strategies. So has anyone ever heard, or I'm sure we've all seen condo duplexes, right? Does everyone know what condo duplexes are? Yes, no?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. So, at least in the state of Washington, it is extremely easy to condo something, right? Well, obviously, you have to condo something that's 2 units and above. And that process requires a surveyor, it requires CC&Rs, which are covenants, conditions, and restrictions, which an attorney does, and it has a map, and you literally have all that done, you take it to the county, they stamp it, and all of a sudden you have a condo. So you can, and we have in the past, built a lot of duplexes, condoed them, and we were able to build them for a less expensive price because, like we talked about before, right, you're kind of like sharing roofs and walls and framing and things like that. And then you can go and turn them around to condos and sell them at a higher price per unit to individual buyers. Less than single family, but still more than what an investor would pay as a duplex. So that is one strategy. Another strategy is, of course, you just sell, whatever, your 2 to 4 units to another investor. That's usually based on the going cap rate and or the condition and or what you have going on with your property. Sometimes the cap rates depend on location. And then the other option too is you've got owner-occupant buyers that want to house hack or live in one side. So there's a lot of different exit strategies as opposed to like single family. Your exit strategy is, I guess you could sell it to an investor. It's going to be considerably probably lower than what a regular buyer would buy it for, but there's just not a whole lot there. When you have a larger apartment complex, you don't have owner occupants, right, that are going to be buying an apartment complex. So there's a lot of flexibility on the exit strategy. And as we're going into whatever is going to be happening over the next couple of years with the recession or a growth period, who knows, having more options, do we think it's better or worse? Much better. Better. Okay, cool. Just make sure you guys pay attention. Okay. So the other thing, this is my duplex. They're super easy to build. So that may be a new concept to some of you guys, but again, like our goal here is just to put options out there, and whatever you think in your head, wow, I really like that option, I want to learn more about it, then we'll help you learn more about it. If you say, that's not for me, totally fine. But 2 to 4 units are extremely easy to build. So as I mentioned, and as we all know, we are in a very high cost of living area. We also have somewhat limited land as compared to Eastern Washington and Midwest and things like that, right? So the land is a premium here. And the interesting thing about 2 to 4 units is there's really nobody dominating the space, and nobody meaning like an entity or a company, right? We have a lot of people developing A-class apartment complexes, right? We see cranes everywhere in Seattle and the East Side. We see small home builders trying to make it right now, right? Not a whole lot for them to build. But there's this huge gap where nobody is really fulfilling, and that is on this small multifamily side. So duplexes in particular are probably my favorite because they are considered residential in the building standard. So you can pretty much put a duplex anywhere that has the lot size that'll fit it.
Only duplex or 2 to 4?
So the zoning changes when you get triplex and above.
Okay.
And then that also is the commercial building standards. So we have like lending requirements, and then we have building standards, which the municipalities use to determine what the code is and what you have to build. Triplex and above is considered commercial, so the thing to note there is that you're doing fire sprinklers, oftentimes ADA, special parking, things like that. But duplexes, you can fit them almost anywhere that has the lot size, and everywhere is different, right? So I'm not going to tell you it's a certain lot size because Seattle's different than Everett, here is different than other places. But if this is really interesting to anyone, there's a lot of opportunity here to do that, and it's super easy. Yeah.
What builder do you use?
Myself. Or I have a husband, he's at home. But so I have we have in staff. or on staff building. But yeah, there's a lot of builders that'll do it though. So you could do an option. In the past, a lot of our building, we had done flat fee. So we paid a guy a flat fee to be our kind of builder. I was project manager, kind of managing him, right? And then he hired all the subs and kind of seeing everything, and I told him what to build. So that's an option. I think that there's other, probably, what are they called? Not a dare. There's some other builders, yeah.
So you're doing a flat fee. Is he negotiating the pricing for the subs, or you just giving them just curious how?
Oh yeah. So I give bonuses for better pricing. So it was on him to get the bid, right, from everyone. And then if he came in under budget, he got a bonus. If he came in at budget, no bonus. So he made some calls, yeah. Yeah.
Just a question. So I've got a lot that I can subdivide in Burien. So I'm hiring a company that does that. Do I need to do anything specific, or will a duplex meet those requirements?
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know the code.
Okay, so it's really. So what I guess
dependent.
is it just area specific?
Yes.
Okay.
Typically, in any residential zone,
Yeah.
typically, you can fit if you can meet the setbacks, then you can do a duplex. Yeah, because a lot of the municipalities came back and said, we have a lack of housing. What do we do? Well, the smart ones said we will let builders build duplexes on lots that were typically single family. So, but every municipality is different. So, yeah.
Do you hire an architect and everything, or do you use like a spec?
Yeah. I go on like homeplans.com, find something that'll fit, and then give it to a guy to draw it out.
Okay. Have you
Call
looked
me.
into what is the cost of just picking a spec home? Because I do see some multifamily specs out there. Is that
For the
all?
plans?
Yeah.
I don't know. Where'd Cody? He was in the other one. I don't know. I paid $3,500 for an architect to draw it and engineer it because they have the extra stamp. So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not tens of thousands of dollars. So it's, I guess, relatively cheap.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. I know I totally glossed over this, but I just want to implant the idea. And if you guys have further questions, I can help.
So you usually do one story only? You cannot do two in a small?
Oh no, yeah, you can build 2 stories. I wanted to do, so I only own single family, or I'm sorry, single story, our entire portfolio. That'll change eventually. But that's because we do the supported living. I also like the idea of having the ability to rent to the aging baby boomers, that there's not enough room for them in retirement homes. So I have a purpose behind that. But the nice thing, the point being though, is that when you're building, you can build whatever you want, right? So for me, I said, well, geez, if I'm gonna be building, I might as well build for the future, because we're gonna have this thing for a long time, right? So single story always is more desirable than having stairs. People with small kids, right? I have a small kid. If I had the choice, all things being the same, a single story versus 2-story, I'd rather not deal with the stairs. People that have knee issues or mobility issues, single story is great. So that was just personal preference, but you can build whatever. Yeah.
The supported living that you did on this one, is that a very difficult process?
That's another story. Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, we can chat about, I'll show you guys an example.
Like wider doors and stuff like that?
What's that?
So like wider doorways and stuff like that?
Yeah, if you want to go full ADA, then it's like wider doors, huge bathrooms, and yeah, we don't do that. But I think there's a strategy for it for sure.
ADA is just a lot of work.
Yes, and it's expensive. So, cool. So recession proof. So obviously we covered a lot of reasons why. These are great. We kind of hit on the long-term fixed debt, which is awesome. The other thing, so I was kind of getting in as the recession was happening, and I saw a lot of owners that had single-family houses that were like larger single-family houses. Their rents were dropping, right? Whereas my rents were actually staying the same because I owned all 2-bedroom, 1-bath, small little dinky, like 800 to 1,000 square feet duplexes. And so when times are tough, right, people usually have to scale back. So, the chance of them paying $3,000 a month for a single family versus if they have to go down to a duplex that's half of it is, $1,800 a month, right? those are the kind of things that we're gonna see when whatever next recession happens. So I think for the, people that are kind of planning with that in mind, small multifamily is awesome. And then you also don't have to worry about, the balloon payments on commercial of, is your balloon payment gonna be due right in the middle or right at the end or right at the beginning of a recession where you're gonna have to try to figure out how to get out of that payment and refinance that. A lot of people have lost a lot of money in commercial real estate during the last one. And it wasn't even their fault, it was just the rates had gone up so much and it was really hard to, refinance. So with this, you lock in the mortgage the day you close. Unless you want to refinance, you don't have to worry about that mortgage for, 30 years.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Do you have some restriction, like how many people can live in a 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, like the condos have, or apartments?
Oh, like me personally, do I have
Yeah.
a restriction like that?
Is that okay? You have a family of 4 or not 10?
Yes and no. So everyone has their own criteria. So I would say definitely research landlord-tenant law and then come up with your own criteria and make sure that you provide the criteria to tenants as they're looking. Yeah. Cool. Before we get into case studies, do you guys have any questions? I know I just slammed a bunch of information right there. I see some confused looks on people's faces. Yes.
So what's the downside of owning a 2 to 4 units versus single family dwelling?
Yeah.
You only get 2 to 4 units?
You'll want more, right?
Yeah, you want more?
The downside is something.
Are you,
No.
Well, there's probably
Yeah.
more people looking for a single family home than a duplex, right?
sorry, say it again? Is there more?
Most likely, there's more people looking for a 3-2 single family home to live by themselves than to buy a home where they're buying half of a home.
As a renter or a
No,
buyer?
as a buyer, as a standard, like there's probably more
Sure.
buyers on the planet than there are in this room, right?
There's a
More
lot of
buyers than
people-
investors, right?
True, but we get a ton of investors that would like, and as an investor, you usually will start small, right? And the duplex, triplex, fourplexes can be a relatively easy way to jump into investment. So I think there's more buyers for those than there are for the 20-unit apartment buildings. I've got clients that are fine with breaking even buying single-family residences. I would never do that. That's not my strategy. But they're all about it, and they'll spend, like Jen said, $600,000-$700,000 on a building that's going to rent for $3,000 a month. That doesn't fit my plan, right? But they're banking on appreciation. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. But to me, if you're a cash flow investor, like what you're saying is, as an appreciation investor, yeah, maybe a 3-2 single family would be a better investment down the road than a duplex.
I mean, like people that are not in this room that are coming home from work and going to Safeway right now.
Uh-huh.
They want a house, not to invest, to live in. So
Sure.
Yeah.
the 3-2s or whatever, 2-2s, whatever. There's more people in this area trying to buy a house for themselves than there are investors. Now it might be that the actual number of 2 and 2-4s are this small pocket, and there's a ton of investors for that. And so it would just sell super easy.
Right.
And it'd be the same percentage delta as you see from a
Right.
standard
So
family home.
to speak to that, the appreciation level will probably be a little higher on a single family because you have a bigger buyer pool, right? You've got more people that want to buy those. But you're right also in the sense that there are very few 2 through 4 unit properties available compared to the number of single family properties available as well. So I mean, to me, I've never seen anybody have trouble selling a well-priced duplex, triplex, or fourplex, right? They usually move pretty quick.
Well, I think the other thing too is that you might have a smaller pool of buyers, but most people buy multiples, right? So like you might have
True.
10 investors that have,
Well, also the
40.
market, right? So there might be 1 million single families and 50,000 duplexes and fourplexes, and you got 75,000 investors that want to buy them,
Right.
and you've got 900,000 people who want to buy houses, right?
Right.
So,
But those 50,000 investors don't want to just buy one; they want to
No,
buy
and then
7,
on top of
right?
that-
Yeah.
Yeah.
on top of that, you have a bigger problem because now they want more.
Yeah, exactly.
well, and that's actually, so you bring up that reminded me that we didn't even talk about 1031 exchanges. So for people that want to level up, it's extremely beneficial to take, do a 1031 exchange and level up from a duplex, triplex, fourplex to get more properties. Yeah.
What's the timing on that?
Timing?
So 1031 exchange, can you explain that?
45 days to identify a new property and then 180 days to close. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever look at like single families that were non-conforming to convert them to multifamily or?
Ooh, yes, it's expensive.
Okay.
Very, very, very expensive. And it's almost always the issue with the electrical and the plumbing, because that's inside walls, right? So like in order to, unless you want to pay you as the landlord everyone's utilities and then just like flat fee back or whatever. I mean, you guys had that situation, right? I mean, it's, and then sometimes it's like, do you get the permits for it? And then, so it gets really tricky.
Like I was thinking on a really ugly house that it was gonna be strip it to the studs kind of thing. And if you wanted to do that, I mean, it might make more sense than something that's well put together than having to tear it all apart kind of thing.
I think if you can get the right price on it, with anything at the right price would be a good deal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so totally, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
How much more complicated is the financing on the new construction?
It's very easy. I'll show you the case study when we get there.
Okay.
As you guys ask questions, can you hear in the back? Yeah, okay. Yes, some, no? Okay, cool, yeah.
So you mentioned duplexes have kind of that unique benefit of being able to like plot them anywhere that the zoning allows for it. Are there any similar like benefits to 4 units specifically, or even 3 units specifically that you can think of that you didn't necessarily get talked about?
Yeah, I mean, the more units you can fit on the same land and under the same loan, the better, right? So like if you can stack all, like I look at it as like income streams. So the more income streams that you can put on one lot, under one roof, under one loan, the better. The challenge though with, once you go over a duplex in most municipalities, you're doing full curb gutter sidewalk, and then you're also doing like extra parking, and so it's a little bit more challenging to build like a triplex or a fourplex because you have extra costs, and then without getting totally into like drainage and stuff, there's just a lot more extra costs. So you have to make sure that you can kind of meet those requirements in order to make that make sense.
Now, is that the same scenario as adding more than one duplex on a property?
Yes, that's a land use action. Yeah, to get the lot split where everything has a tax parcel. Yeah, yeah.
How does the cost per square foot for building like new units compare with a duplex versus a single family or even a quadplex?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think duplexes and single family, well, it depends on what level of finish you're doing, right? So if you're doing crown molding and like
Just
Corian.
something standard for
Yeah.
an average 2-bedroom, 1-bath.
Okay, I think cost to build are about the same if you're building like, if you're comparing 2-story to 2-story. If you're going like tall skinnies on like a triplex or fourplex, it's gonna be more expensive. So the more height you go, then your price per foot goes up. So hope that without getting like actual numbers, if that makes sense. But yeah, yeah. Anyway, yeah.
So with all the extra expense of a fourplex, given a similar property size or property cost, do you, because now you put 4 units on the same property, which is now split by 4, do you see the price per door or the price per square foot completed about the same, or you still think the fourplexes are more expensive?
Well, fourplexes are more expensive, but the price per unit is going to be a little bit lower than lower than duplexes.
Right, that's what I was, yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, yep. Is there more questions? Is that a hand or a? Okay, cool. You guys want to go to a case study? Oh yeah.
Based on your guys' experience, do you guys see if someone has like a duplex and they can add one more unit, they try to invest that, or they try to find a different property and invest in a different property than renovate their existing home?
Like adding a, like
Yeah,
making a
add
duplex
value
a
add.
triplex?
Yeah, value adding to their existing.
Yeah.
Do a lot of people do that in Washington?
I haven't seen it. I know that sometimes remodeling existing is more expensive than building new. Because you have something existing to work with that you have to work around and everything, right? I don't know, have you ever seen anyone add a unit to existing units?
Not a bunch. Yeah, sometimes like there was one we did in Tacoma that had like an unfinished basement, and they added a couple of units. It was a duplex with a like full unfinished basement. They added 2 more units down there. I haven't seen anybody like bolt on an extra unit on the side or anything like that. But if you got space, you know, I mean, I think you just really have to run the numbers on the specific project, and you know, kind of depends on what it's going to cost you to build it to add it on, and what can you get in rents, and then you know, like that kind of thing, you might have to pay cash for, and then maybe think about refinancing later. How much cash in, how much cash can you get back out, and what are the extra returns you're going to get Like I had a gal that wanted to put a dadu. You guys know what a dadu is? Detached ADU in her backyard, and it was going to cost her $150,000, and she thought she could rent it for like $1,200. And I said, well, I think you could do a lot better with that money somewhere else, because then she was going to look at refinancing her mortgage, but I helped her buy the place 5 years ago with a 3.5% rate. You know, I said, you're going to lose ground on the rate. You're going to put in all this cash. We're not going to be able to get all the cash back out. If you want to have a rental unit, let's go to Spokane and buy some rental units with your 150. Yeah.
So, talking about 2 to 4 units, what are the good areas right now in Washington State where you see much active people in that for 2 to 4 unit areas?
Wherever you can find a deal. and I mean, I think any area is a good area if you can get good rents, good tenants, and a good price, right? So there's good deals that are done every day. I think the other thing is what my criteria would be may be different than yours, right? So what would be maybe not a good deal for me would be a great deal for you. So yeah, it totally depends. I know that didn't answer.
Well, right now we are targeting Spokane and Moses Lake, Ephrata, like areas where you can hit the 1% rule, right? Everybody, I imagine, understands the 1% rule, right? So if you can hit that, you can usually make money. And like I was saying earlier, the $600,000 house that rents for $3,000 is the 0.5% rule, and it just doesn't pay, right? But if you can make 1%, we're not scared of almost any city, right? Like, I mean, we'd go anywhere for that. So.
What about the tenant law restrictions, like in those other places, like besides Seattle? Are they catching up in terms of becoming more restrictive?
No.
Spokane, yeah.
And we hope it stays in Seattle.
Yeah.
But no, when you go Eastern Washington, it is totally a different ballgame. Currently, Seattle is doing its own thing, and we hope that it just stays there. Yeah, and Oregon too. I know.
I don't know if you're going to go into that. I'm just curious, how are you handling locating like property management that's like reliable, stuff that's not any driving distance?
Yeah. A lot of times we get the property managers by referral. And then we've realized that sometimes you can have a really good property manager and then they take on a bunch of business and then they aren't as good anymore because they've taken on more of that. So you kind of have to find people that can scale. But it's trial and error, right? We typically, and we also have, there's different property managers often for like single family homes, multifamily, and then apartments, right? So there's kind of like almost, I mean, sometimes like a single family home property manager can do like 2 to 4 units, right? But when you go over like 20, that's a little bit of a different skill set. So typically we, either myself just interviews a bunch of people and tries to find somebody that kind of aligns with my line of thinking of property management, and or we ask for referrals, we talk to other investors, the agents that we work with, they give us their people too, and yeah, so just by referral is the best, for sure, yeah.
So if you were just all single family for the moment, just as an example, in one location, would you use more than one property management company?
Probably not. I'd find a good one and just have them do what they do. Okay. Yeah.
You might get a better rate that way.
Yeah.
Well, right. So you get a better rate, but if they go crazy on you, then you don't have anybody. You know, you have say 15 units or something like that, and they go sideways, then you're kind of stuck. Right, for a short period of time until you get somebody else in place.
I would say have a bench.
Yeah,
be ready, right?
Talent bench.
Yeah.
And, then, and from 1 to 5 units or 1 to 5 single family homes, what do you see what's the general in Spokane as an example of the property management fee?
10%. Yeah, 8 to 10%.
So yeah, so where do you see 8? Do you see that a certain number of units or just negotiation?
Well, yeah, it depends on units and then also the services of the property manager. Sometimes like some property managers will charge 8, but then they charge a lease-up fee. And then other property managers will charge 10 and no lease-up fee. And then some, so you kind of almost have to like compare services and then see what you'd be paying. Yeah. So and then sometimes the really low stuff, I mean, I've seen property managers even here charge like 6%, but they don't do certain things, right?
And revisit it, right? Like I've got a new property that we had to totally re-tenant and she wanted 10% for the first year. And I said, that's fair. You're going to do a lot of work, right? But as we get it up and running, we figure out, we get all the problems solved, we're going to renegotiate that on the next year contract. So.
And then are these property management companies with services like, to go out and fix problems, or do you use your own people specifically separately? Or do you let the...
They'll always have that, but it's a good idea to have your own or some extra contacts as well, because theirs can sometimes be more expensive, and there can be like little side agreements, right? So I've had to, yeah, kickback's a nice way to say it, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, you have to shop that around a little bit. I've noted that both here and out of town.
Some of them will tell you directly right up front, like we add 50% to any contractor work if we put the contractor in.
I think every property manager is different.
Yeah.
Like, it's rare to find a property manager that will handle an initial renovation for you. And like their people, they normally have handymen. But my guy in Indianapolis, he's a house flipper too that owns a property management company. So if you need a renovation on something you're buying, he'll charge like $500 to oversee it for you. It gets done, and then he puts a tenant in there. But that's rare, right? So it's like, yeah, different things. Yeah.
Probably the easiest thing is don't kid yourself. You have a management company. You have to manage them.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't
There
throw
is
them the
such a
keys
thing
and
as
walk-
managing the
You
manager.
don't, you don't throw them the keys and walk away. Trust me.
Even, I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Are you putting away less money for CapEx when you do a new build?
Oh, yeah. There's like no CapEx.
Yeah.
I mean, appliances maybe, but they're like under warranty. And then other than that, I mean, just tenant damage stuff, but.
But put away maybe a little bit for a roof or something like that, like 30 years down the road.
Sure. Probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah. But nothing. Yeah. 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 Carl.
Back on the property management topic is, looking at your tenant pool to decide whether or not are you having high turnover. So back to your shopping around point, if you're having a property manager that does a full month lease up for the first month, but a lower rate, but your tenant pool is a higher turnover, so consider looking at more of a lower lease up and higher rate to reduce your monthly expenses or your annual expenses.
For sure. Yep.
Because right now, the bookend like that we've got is, albeit it's been pretty new for us, but the tenant pool is going to be turning over a little bit more often because it's a 2-1.
Yep.
And so what I did is I looked for a property management company that had a low upfront lease, but a higher monthly rate.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Cool. All right. Yes.
Just
Last
a quick
one.
tip for my first rental, I'll just share with everyone. Be sure that you're looking at like when their expenses is on their actual rent, and make sure if you can negotiate in that it's on the actual income coming in. So let's say if they negotiate all utilities in your lease, and now of course someone's going to rent it out more because gas and everything's included. So if they're getting paid off the percentage of rent, you're getting everything after that, if that makes sense.
I think what he's saying is the utilities are bumping up the rent fee, and that's just filtering down the property.
Cool. You want to talk about your Snohomish
Sure.
place?
Yeah. Yeah, you bet.
So, sorry, real quick, we're just going into some case studies to kind of give you guys, I think, visuals and actual like real life examples are really helpful, or at least I think they're helpful. So, we're just going to give you guys some examples on this. I think the one thing though to point out, at least for me, first year always is not a good year for a new property. So when you see these returns and you're like, wow, that's crazy, I just want to preface by saying don't expect that in year one, because that's almost never happens. It usually takes some time and effort to get that. So
yeah, you bet. So this was a property that I bought from a wholesaler, actually. And so I'd always tell people too, is like, people are always asking me, where do you find your deals? And I say, cast a wide net, right? Be open, right? This was a wholesale deal. They had it tied up for $295. It originally came around at like $375 or something like that. And I passed, and I think everybody else did. That's why it kept going around. And then pretty soon the guy just called me and said, what would you give me? And I said, well, I looked at it and I thought, my numbers, I don't want to insult you, but here's what my numbers were. And he said, can you close in a week? And I said, you bet. And so we did it, right? So we were able to pick this up at what I thought was a pretty good price. He's maintained his ability to close on the contract, which is important for a wholesaler as well, and still made a few bucks. I put this side actually is the 2-bedroom, 1-bath side, and what you can't see behind this giant tree is there's another bigger house over here that is a 3-1 or 3-2, excuse me. And basically they were smushed together with a carport, right? And so I finished the carport into 2 separate garage stalls. And then this one was, I walked through it and quite pleasantly surprised. It was in great shape. The other one, different story. Put about 55 into it, 10 for the garage conversion. The rest was inside the interior of that house. This side was rented when I got it at $850. This side was vacant. As soon as we got it fixed up, we rented it for $2,050 on that side. These guys had a, like Jen was saying, the first year wasn't pretty because I bought it in, I don't know, you didn't look it up by chance, did you? I want to say it was like September. And I didn't have a tenant in here until December. And these guys had 6 more months on their lease at $850. I looked around and it was really should have been around $1,300. And I called them up when their lease was about a month due, and I said, hey, you guys lucked out for the last whatever, but it's time to pay the piper. You know, I'm sorry, but like I got to get you closer to market rent. I'd like for you to stay if you can, but you know, $850 is out of the question. I said market rents are really $1,300. I would consider 12 if you wanted to sign a 1-year lease. And I thought I was being real nice. They didn't like that, but we talked and we negotiated. I said, well, I really got to get it to 13, but how about we do 11 for 6 months and 13 for the next 6 months on a 1-year lease? They grumbled a little bit. They looked around. They came back, said, we'll stay, right? Because they knew that was a pretty great deal. I fully expected them to move out at 6-month mark. But they didn't. They stayed, and then actually I just helped them close on a house last Friday. So yeah, so we made a great relationship there. We worked with them. They were happy to stay there. He's given me 3 referrals for his friends that want to live there, paying $1,400 a month. Nice. So yeah, so this side now is $2,100. This side will be $1,400. Payment on that, I think I put it in there, but I want to say it's right around $2,000, something like $2,100, something like that. So yeah, getting the current rents up from effectively $850 and vacant to $3,500 on the invested, effectively $370 is what I put into that. The appraised value as the 3 months after I bought it, right when the renovations were done, was $470, and it's about $520 right now. Yeah, go on.
I didn't catch the year you bought it.
2017, September of 2017.
So you offered them $1,200. They said no. Then you said $1,100 for 6 months and $1,300.
You know what it is? Still $1,200. Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Sign here.
Yeah. Well, I stepped them up, right? They got more comfortable with it as time went by. Yeah, exactly. So so Jen calculated cash on cash. I mean, pretty amazing. They're not all this good. They're not all like that. But that said, I mean, this still happened relatively recently, right? We've been telling people have been telling me there's no deals out there for the last 3-4 years. You just got to keep your mind open and be ready. And again, wholesaler, great connection. I think somebody in the back said they were a wholesaler. I would like to give you my card and have you send me your deals.
It's not a 1%.
Yeah. It wasn't. It wasn't when I bought it, and I didn't think that it would be. It's real close to what I paid for it to be 1%. And I will take a slight discount to the 1% rule in our counties, King and Snohomish County, because I'm going to get, my Oklahoma properties are going to get a 1.5% appreciation. This, I can probably bank on 4 to 6, right? So yeah, I'll take a little bit of a discount. And I bought it so right, and I was able to get, what I didn't say, do you have another slide on this, or is just this one?
Just.
Okay, so I bought this with hard money because I had to close in a week. So I bought it with hard money. I gave them a 15% cash security deposit, and they gave me a 100% loan. So they gave me a loan for $315, added in the hard money fees to that, so I think it was around $321. So when I was all said and done, my new appraisal came in at $470. I was able to get a new loan at 75% of the $470, completely cover my purchase price. The only thing I left in this was the fix-up. Okay, so I really truly have, into a $500,000 property, I have about 10%, right? So I was able to, through moving money around and cleverly doing it, I have an investment property I bought with 10% down that cash flow is $1,400 a month. It's hard to do that.
It also proves the point that the 1% rule is just a
Rule of
thumb
Yeah.
for evaluating, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be, or that, because obviously who wouldn't want a 23%? Right? But the only reason why that worked is because you got it at a good deal.
Right. If I were to sell this to someone now at 5.25 at $3,500 a month in rent, that you guys would all probably pass on that.
Yeah.
But the way I bought this and how much cash I have into it, it gives me a great return.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Are you still finding 1%
stuff around here through your contacts?
Well, I mean-
I was gonna say, that's 2017. I look every day. I don't see anything.
I mean, here's the thing. Yes, but they go real fast. There was a fourplex that just came up through a wholesale deal that I got sent that was in Tacoma. Pro forma, absolute 1%. Right? Currently, definitely not. And then I was mentioning to Jen, I have another case study that's not as sexy as that one, but it was a fourplex in Des Moines that a client of mine was buying. VA, owner occupied, who's going to live in one unit and rent out the other 3 and basically have his payment paid for. He got cold feet at the last minute, and his appraisal came in short. He was in contract to buy it at $600. The appraisal came at like $550. So he got cold feet, wanted to back out, and I tried to get him to buy this because I knew it was a good deal. And in the end, he said, "Nope, I'm out. I'm going to move on." I said, "Cool. Do you mind if I buy it?" And he said, "No, knock yourself out." So I wrote the seller an offer at $560 because I knew what the appraisal came in at, and I knew they probably wouldn't want to go all the way down to the appraisal value, but I was going to get a new conventional appraisal instead of this VA appraisal that we had. And so they signed it right away. They didn't negotiate at all. They just signed it off. The rents on those units were $850, $825, and $875. So average of $850, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, cookie cutter, just exactly what I want, and 1 vacant unit. The vacant unit had just been redone a little bit because my VA buyer was going to move in. So in order for him to move in, we had to have a vacant unit. So these guys had marketed this property right from that perspective. But what they didn't really say was what the rents should be, right? So the rents, 1 was month to month, and 2 had about 3 to 4 months left on their lease. The 1 was vacant. We put it on the market right away, got a tenant and a backup tenant at $1,350 immediately. This guy on the other upstairs unit moved out in the middle of the night, saw what was coming, right? So he's like, "I'm out of here." So I said, "Hey, is that that backup tenant still want to live there?" "You bet." "Okay, paint and carpet, get him in there." So we had 2 tenants in there within a week of owning it at $1,350. And then the other 2, when the leases came up, we said $1,350, and they stayed and paid. So we went from, that property was negative cash flow, not even close all day long, to getting, well, I don't know, what is that, 13, 7, 27, 40, $5,400 on a 560 purchase, right? Just poorly marketed property. So those deals are out there. You just have to make sure you're looking at the pro forma and what can I really get for rents, and be realistic too, right? I bought a deal in Everett that the pro forma rents were $1,300. I listed it at $1,200 and it was crickets, and I listed it at $1,150, crickets. $1,100, I finally got somebody in there, right? So you have to be pretty realistic and not expect that yours is the best in the neighborhood and it's going to go for the top dollar, right? But yeah, that was another great example, and that was last year, early part of last year, so about a year ago. So, I would say don't think that there's not a deal just because there wasn't one the last time you looked, or if you have been looking regularly. You just have to scour, right? That was a poorly marketed MLS property. The other one was a off-market wholesale deal. So,
Dina.
Yeah.
So this is our first deal together. This is our first deal together. Jennifer wouldn't even step foot in one side because there was so much mold. Pretty much my now husband and I walked into this place, and he looked at me and he said, "I can do everything." We had to tear everything down. Literally, the roof, it had 2-foot soffits on it, so the whole exterior of the soffits were rotted out. Tore the whole thing off, lid down to, I don't even think we saved a stud. We totally redesigned the place. Had to punch in a crawl space because there wasn't even a crawl space in the place. As you see, we picked it up for $105. We put $50,000 into it, cashed it all out in about 2 years. I don't even think it was that close. Maybe it was about a year, right about 2 years. Current value is $360. We cash flow $1,550 a month now, and that'll be going up another $100 here by summer time.
Nice.
And it's just a great place.
Was it $50,000 because he did the work?
Yep.
Okay.
I was gonna say.
It's a lot of work for $50,000.
$50,000 for a full rebuild. I need your subs.
Yeah, we spent every day until about 10 o'clock at night there, 7 days a week for
a year.
Almost a year.
Oh, wow.
So, first year not so good.
First year?
We actually became engaged during this project, and I had to pretty much give him a deadline so that he can marry me. David, we don't get married. So, but I mean, we both were working too, full-time jobs. So this was a evening, weekend thing. Wow.
Good bonding time.
Yeah.
There you go.
If we survived that, we will survive. We knew that, right?
There you go. Yeah. And you got all of your initial cash back.
All the initial cash
And you
back
still,
in 2
what's your
years.
loan amount?
Our
Did you
loan-
do a cash?
Yeah,
or-
we did a full loan. It's 150. Well, I mean, we don't know that now, but it was a $150,000 loan.
So you have $110,000 in equity and it cash flows $1,550 a month, and you got all your money back?
Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure we got all that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's by far our best deal. I mean,
yeah,
it's a great deal. But I mean, you can't pick up a duplex for $105,000 and put only $50,000 into it. I mean, the market was good. It was a good time in the market.
we can in some places. Everett, not so much.
And like
Mhm.
you said, we did all the work.
Yeah.
How long?
But it's small. I mean, it's each unit is right in your comfort zone. It's 860 square feet, so the costs were really, you know, if you think about it. First, you have the electrical and the plumbing and everything done by yourself.
What year was that? 10?
10.
9? Yeah.
10, 11. Yeah, later 10.
Cool. Good stuff. So this is mine. I wanted to give some just vanilla kind of boring deals, but show you guys how you can turn a boring deal into a good deal. This was my first out-of-state buy. So I bought this one in Greenwood, Indiana, which is outside of Indianapolis. It was sitting on the MLS forever, just sitting out there for whatever reason, nobody wanted it. So I bought it for $155,000, put $19,000 into the renovation. The current value, this was December 2016, and current value is $265,000. Cash flow is about $940,000 a month after factoring in everything, property management, vacancy, all that stuff. So my cash on cash is actually 20%, but cash on cash is my invested amount divided by the annual cash flow. Do you see anything else there though? Have I returned my initial investment based on the equity?
Yep.
Right? Yeah. So when you guys hear returns, the point of bringing this one up is that you want to know what they're talking about. So sometimes, like on certain websites, I won't name any websites, they'll say like these crazy high returns. That's like 35% ROI. Well, oftentimes they're adding in the cash flow, tax benefits, some kind of assumption for appreciation, and then principal pay down and all of these things. So whenever we talk cash on cash return, that's why I said cash on cash as opposed to ROI. It is your initial cash that you have into the deal divided by the actual cash flow, so what you're putting in your pocket. But when you add in the tax benefits plus the difference, and if I were to sell that today, right, I mean, I'd get all my money back and then some plus the cash flow that I had gotten all that time. But I wanted to bring this one up because a lot of times, like we say, the appreciation is not there out of state. Because we're here in Washington, we see the properties go up so much, right? Like, and we just assume that everyone else is, flat. But the difference with multifamily is that now you have income streams, and investors will pay a certain rate for your income stream. If that makes sense. So like single family houses, your single family house is going to be worth whatever your neighborhood comps are, with maybe a little bit of difference based on your condition. But with multifamily, it's a little bit different when you get even into bigger apartment complexes, but if you're a phenomenal operator, which means that you have the ability to increase pretty much the income and reduce the expenses, then you can look at the current market cap rate and say, if I were to flip this today, an investor would pay me $265 because I've maximized the value based on the income, if that makes sense. Now, a lot of times too, of course, if you're doing like a refinance, you have to have comps and for appraisals and everything like that. But you can control the asset differently based on how you control the income and the expenses, if that makes sense. So in this case, in like 2.5 years or whatever that I've owned it, it has increased in value over $100,000. And the reason why is when I bought it, the rents were like $700 a month, and I'm getting $22.35, right? So I have well increased the rents and then fixed it up and made it a little bit nicer. So if you hear that there's no appreciation out of state, like take that with a grain of salt, but know that it can be a little bit different if you really maximize the NOI, the net operating income. Does that make sense? Yeah, so this is really just boring. I forget about this property all the time. And
Well, that's
once. Yeah, Dina and I flew with our husbands after it was, and that's actually a question that comes up all the time. People are like, oh, do you fly out and look at all these properties? I'm like, yeah, no.
So-
I look at the numbers.
So what took you to Indiana? What was there a reason why you were looking at that area?
I analyzed different markets based on the job growth, the population changes, the crime rates, and then also the price to rent ratios. So Indianapolis is at the top of my list. Found a property. I'm like, I don't know why this thing is sitting out there, but I'll buy. I think they were asking like 170, and so I offered 155, and they took it. So I specifically searched for markets, and that's kind of like where we built our investment teams in markets that make sense for investors. Like, I'm sure people are making money in Detroit. I don't like Detroit because it doesn't meet those metrics, right? It has declining population, job growth is down, and all these factors, right? So that's what made me choose Indianapolis, and this just happened to be like the best suburb in Indianapolis. It's like, okay. Go for it. So this is a new build example. So back to my little duplex. And again, just without getting like a whole lot of details on the new build, I love new building because you can control what you buy the land for dictates the investment at the end of the day. So the fixed costs are the building costs, but if you can get the land for super cheap, which is what happened with this deal, then you can have a ton of equity. So our all-in costs are $328,000, including the land, including the permits, including everything to build it. The new value is $650,000. We're doing a cash out refinance with Cody right now. We've actually, we don't have any of our own money left into this deal, but we're paying ourselves $127,000 because it still cash flows even though we're doing that. So if you ever want to make a big chunk of money but not pay the IRS, you just do a cash out refinance. Make sure it still cash flows and everything works. But so anyways, we're paying ourselves $127,000 for a job well done. And then this will cash flow about $1,100 a month. So my cash on cash is infinite. Because I didn't want to do the math. I mean, like, it's like about 2,500, I don't know. So,
unmeasurable.
The metric that I use for new construction is 75%. You want your cost to be 75% or less of the new value. And if you can hit that metric, you can refinance and have no money into the deal. And then you have a brand new, whatever you built, that you have to do the cash flow analysis. But basically, you can build with having no money into the deal.
How did you find a lot?
It's on the MLS. But
There's more to that story.
No, so a single family house with a double lot was on the MLS, incorrectly marketed, and it sat and sat and sat, and nobody was biting it. And so I said, well, wait a second, this is a double lot. It's zoned multifamily. This is crazy. So we bought it, and it had a house on one, and then the extra lot next to it. We had to do a boundary line adjustment, flipped the house, and then kept the lot, and was able to take a huge tax write-off because we took a loss on the house, right, when we sold it, because the basis carried over to the existing lot. So they're out. I mean, like, they're out there. So you just have to look for them. So I have like a saved search for any lots that are over like 7,000 square feet in almost all municipalities. And if it's like 24,000 square feet, then you just want to make sure that that zoning can support multiples. And sometimes you have to do a short plat to get that. But they are out there, especially in the neighborhoods with old houses that people are looking at them as like, the flippers don't want them because there's not enough equity for them to like make money. But there's no builders that are building small multifamily. So there's like no man's land as far as people like seeing this and buying it.
You bought that in 18, right? 2018?
Yes. Yeah. So that's fine. And then this is a whole nother strategy, but so like I like to have different strategies. So this is I wanted to show you like not the best deals that I've ever done, because sometimes that's frustrating. It's like, oh, that's a one-off, 1 in 1,000 deal that people are talking about that would be unlikely for someone to find, right? So I'm just showing you guys the stuff that was on the MLS. So this is a duplex I bought in Mount Vernon, and they were asking like $240, I think. I got it for $237. Not super exciting, but we put $5,800 into it. But we rented it out for above average rates to a care provider, and we have people that are intellectually disabled, where we get rents from the state, and they pay us, or they pay all the utilities. We basically have a 0% vacancy rate. We have very little expenses, so our expenses are cut probably at least 20-30%. So we could pay for this property that on the surface wouldn't look that good of it as a deal, but because we put our strategy on it, we get a 20% cash on cash. So kind of boring vanilla deal that gets a 20% cash on cash only because we have this strategy in our back pocket. So this one cash flows $1,083 a month. In the meantime, it's gone up in value just for whatever reason. Duplexes in the neighborhood are going for more up in Mount Vernon. So, yeah.
How did you get into, I mean, you don't have to explain all the details of what it takes to do the supported living, but how did you come into that strategy?
We bought a triplex that was supported living.
Oh,
And I'd never heard about it before, and I'm like, what is this? And then we figured it out, and then we bought more. We said, oh, you guys need housing, we'll buy you more. And we did. Trying to think. So yeah, those are all the different examples, and then I'll show you guys some stuff out of state. So kind of capping this topic off, the advice for anyone doing small multifamily. One, look for value add opportunities. Value add opportunities could be, doesn't even mean renovations, it just means increase in the income and or decrease in expenses. Do your own research on fair market rents. As Cody was saying on some of his, they were like way under rented. So just because they are currently under rented doesn't always mean that that's the max that the rents could go. So you have to kind of look at, well, what would I need to do and what could that rent for? And then small renovations make a huge difference. So like on that one, I mean, we put $5,800 into 2 units. Like, I mean, there's, wasn't a whole lot to do there. And then you can afford appreciation with better operations. So you guys saw that in my Indianapolis property is we forced the appreciation because we